The universe always spoke. You just needed to learn its language. And now that you're here, it's because something inside you has already begun to understand it. Something that has nothing to do with logic or what you know. It has to do with what you feel when everything repeats. When it seems like life is guiding you without you controlling it. We call this synchronicity. A synchronicity is not a coincidence, it's a clear sign that you're on the right path. It's when something happens at the exact moment. A phrase you hear several times, a person who appears without you looking for them, an opportunity that arrives just when you were about to give up. None of this happens by luck. It's the way life responds to you when you change from within. When your energy moves, the signs activate. And if you know how to recognize them, they help you move forward much faster than you imagine. This audiobook is not here to convince you of anything. It's a guide so you can begin to see what you didn't see before, so you can discover the 7 most important synchronicities that tend to appear when you're about to take a leap of consciousness, of abundance, of truth. Because just before something big arrives in your life, a sign appears, a clue, a synchronicity. And if you ignore it, everything delays. But if you recognize it, something inside you opens, and change accelerates. This book will help you understand how that invisible language works that connects what you feel with what you live, and how everything you've been waiting for might already be close. You just didn't know how to read the signs. Now you're going to learn to see them, to trust them, and to use them as a map to open your true inner treasure. Because the treasure was never outside. It was waiting for you inside. Chapter 1. Synchronicity of the Unexpected Mirror. Sometimes we believe that important changes arrive with big announcements, with spectacular moments or signs impossible to ignore. But it's not always like that. Many times the real beginning of a transformation appears in a much simpler way, but also more uncomfortable. It appears when someone tells us something that hurts, when we see an attitude in another person that deeply bothers us, when a situation shows us a part of ourselves that we'd rather not look at. That's what we call the unexpected mirror. And although at first it may seem like just a nuisance, in reality it's one of the most powerful synchronicities that exist. The unexpected mirror is everything that confronts you. A person who criticizes you without filter, a scene that touches an old wound, a conversation that ends worse than it began. And instead of overlooking these situations as if they were a bad moment or an injustice, the magical mind learns to ask itself, what is this showing me about myself? Because what irritates us most, what moves us most inside, what unsettles us, often doesn't speak about the other, but about us. For example, if someone makes a comment like, "You're not capable of achieving it," and that breaks you down, perhaps it's not just because of the disrespect. Perhaps it's because there's a part of you that still believes you can't, that's still doubting, that still hasn't allowed itself to recognize itself as capable. On the other hand, if you had it completely clear within you, that comment wouldn't have power. It would pass you by. But if it hurts, if it stings, if it bothers you, then it's a mirror and you're facing an enormous opportunity to heal something that has been slowing your growth from within. Another example, more common than you think. It angers you that someone is unpunctual, irresponsible, or unclear with you. But if you review honestly, perhaps you've also been unpunctual with yourself. Perhaps you've also failed yourself in the decisions you made, or have postponed things you know you should do. So what bothers you outside is showing something you still haven't forgiven yourself for, or that you still haven't resolved within. This synchronicity appears when you're ready to see what you hadn't wanted to see. And although it's not comfortable, it's valuable. Because it's impossible to change something if you don't first recognize it. You can't improve your relationship with money, with abundance, or with yourself if you're still projecting your wounds onto others. If you keep blaming the world for what you haven't faced, the mirror doesn't arrive to point at you. It arrives to help you recover your power. And here's where the magical mind enters, that part of you that begins to read situations as messages and not as punishments, that begins to recognize that everything you see outside has something to teach you inside. That every person who irritates you, every scene that touches you, every phrase that shakes you, isn't there by accident. It's there as part of your expansion process. It's not about justifying others or allowing mistreatment. It's about understanding that every time something impacts you emotionally, there's a clue. A clue so you can release a burden, a belief, a story you no longer need to carry. And when you use that information in your favor, you stop reacting and start responding from a much more conscious and free place. Your internal treasure begins to reveal itself when you stop fighting with the reflection and start transforming yourself from the root. Not because you should be perfect, but because you deserve to stop carrying what isn't yours. You deserve to live from a lighter, clearer, stronger version of you, and the mirrors that life presents you are part of that path. And here's a very simple but transformative practice. In the coming days, every time something bothers you, instead of reacting immediately or blaming the external, pause, breathe, and ask yourself honestly, what part of me is being reflected here? Write it down if you can, observe it without judgment, not to criticize yourself, but to know yourself better. Because the clearer you are with yourself, the easier it will be for the universe to show you other signs, cleaner, more loving, more aligned. And when you learn to read the mirror, you stop repeating the same cycles and open space for a type of wealth that can't be obtained outside, a wealth that's born from knowing who you are, what you need, and what you're ready to let go. In the next chapter, you're going to discover a very different synchronicity, but equally powerful. It's the mysterious repetition of symbols, phrases, or signs that seem to follow you without explanation. We'll talk about the second synchronicity, the return of the message, and how recognizing it can help you confirm decisions that your soul already made, even though your mind still has doubts. Chapter 2. Synchronicity of the return of the message. There are signs that arrive with force and others that arrive with patience. They don't hit you, they surround you, they don't interrupt you, they repeat. And they do it with an intention that many times you don't see until it's too obvious to keep ignoring. That's the second synchronicity, and it's called the return of the message. You recognize it when suddenly everything revolves around the same theme. Everyone talks to you about the same thing without knowing it. You see a word you'd never heard before, and it appears 3 times in 1 week. An old movie crosses your path twice in different places. A book that never called your attention starts being mentioned by everyone. You hear a song and then find it playing just when you have an important doubt. And although it may seem like coincidence, in reality it's insistence. This isn't random. It's the universe repeating itself until you pay attention. It's as if life knew that your consciousness needs more than one sign to understand what's already ready to show itself. And that's why it comes back and back and back, not to bother you, but to help you awaken a part of you that's close to opening, but hasn't fully done so yet. For example, let's say you've been feeling for a while that you need to let go of something, a job, a relationship, an old idea, but you don't dare. And suddenly, in 1 week, 3 different people talk to you about letting go without you mentioning it. You see a post that says exactly what you were thinking, or you read a sign that says, let go to receive. It's not coincidence. It's life speaking in your internal language, using the external world as a loudspeaker. Another example. You want to start a business, but you doubt if it's the right time. And without looking for it, a friend tells you she started her business. A video about how to start without fear comes to you, and a book you had forgotten appears open right on a page that talks about starting from zero. There's the message. Insistent, soft, but clear. And although you can keep ignoring it, the truth is that the more something repeats, the more urgent it's emotional or spiritual. Content is for you. This isn't about superstitions or seeing signs where there aren't any. It's about starting to listen to your life as if it were a conversation, not with direct words, but with symbols, with repetitions, with winks that only you can understand. Because what repeats outside has a root inside. And when you recognize the synchronicity, an awareness activates. You begin to realize that you're not as lost as you thought, that life has been guiding you all this time, and you just needed to learn to listen beyond your thoughts, beyond your fears, beyond the rush. Here's a practice that can help you activate it. During the coming days, keep a small list or note on your phone. Every time you see a message that repeats, a word, an idea, an image, a number, a phrase, write it down. It doesn't matter if it seems silly. What's important is to observe. At the end of the week, look at it all together and ask yourself, what theme appears again and again? What part of me needs to hear this more clearly? What decision am I avoiding that this sign wants to accompany? Because the return of the message doesn't appear to confuse you, it appears to confirm you, to tell you, you're not making this up. It's not your imagination, this is your answer. And when you learn to see it that way, the universe stops seeming chaotic and starts feeling intimate, connected, exact. In the next chapter, we'll talk about a synchronicity that doesn't always feel like a blessing, but it is. We'll talk about the void that creates itself, that uncomfortable moment when something or someone leaves without explanation, and how if you don't run to fill it, it can become the perfect entrance for something much better. Chapter 3. Synchronicity of the void that creates itself. Sometimes you don't choose change, change chooses you, and it doesn't ask if you're ready. It simply happens. A person leaves, a stage closes, something that seemed secure falls without prior notice, and the first thing you feel is loss, uncertainty, emptiness. But if you pay attention, there's something else beneath that sudden silence. That's the third synchronicity, the void that creates itself. This type of synchronicity is uncomfortable because it doesn't arrive with explanations, it doesn't come wrapped in logic, it simply happens and it hurts. It hurts because what leaves, many times you wouldn't have let go of by yourself, and it hurts because what remains in its place is a space you don't know how to fill. But there's the true power. In not running to fill it with the same thing, in learning to hold the void like someone caring for fertile land that hasn't been planted yet. Perhaps you ended a relationship that no longer worked, but it wasn't you who decided it, it was imposed on you. And in that moment you felt you lost something valuable, but with time you realized that what you lost wasn't love, it was attachment, it was fear, it was routine disguised as security. And that void that remained at first was exactly the space you needed to find yourself, to heal something you'd been ignoring, or to make room for a more authentic relationship that didn't fit in your life before. Or perhaps you lost a job you thought was stable, and at first everything clouded over, fear, anguish, doubts. But shortly after, ideas started arriving that you'd never allowed yourself to explore. You were forced to be creative, to look for new paths, and without realizing it, that void became the fertile ground where your true growth began. Because when everything is full, nothing new can enter. And the universe knows this. That's why sometimes it helps you release by force what you don't dare to let go. Not to punish you, but to free you. Not because you don't deserve it, but because you deserve something bigger, more aligned, more yours. And if you don't release it, it can't arrive. The big mistake many make when this synchronicity appears is to fill it quickly. Look for a new partner as soon as the previous one leaves. Accept any job as soon as they lose the previous one. Get into a new distraction just to not feel the hole. But the void has a message, and if you cover it before listening to it, that message is lost and everything repeats. The magical mind doesn't fear the void, it honors it. Because it knows it's not a punishment, it's an invitation. And the most important thing you can do when something leaves without explanation is to stop and ask yourself, what part of my life was this occupying that's no longer here? What wasn't I daring to create because this space was taken? Here's a very powerful practice. Choose a situation you've lived in recent months where something left unexpectedly, and write everything that obliged you to look at. Perhaps look at yourself, perhaps look at your environment. Then make a list of new things you could now start, things that didn't fit in your life before as it was. Perhaps a new project, a trip, a habit, a version of you that didn't have space to exist before. Because the void, when you go through it with consciousness, becomes origin, becomes channel, becomes an open door, not to return to the same, but to something completely different. In the following chapter, we're going to talk about a deeply transformative synchronicity, the one that arrives in the form of a person, someone who appears without expecting it, without looking for it, and tells you exactly what you needed to hear, even though you didn't know it. We'll talk about the key encounter and how to recognize when someone is fulfilling a divine role in your path of expansion. Chapter 4. Synchronicity of the key encounter. Not all answers come in the form of an idea. Sometimes they come in the form of a person. And no, we're not referring to someone who arrives with a magical solution or who solves all your problems. We're talking about the key encounter, a synchronicity that happens when a person appears in your life at the exact moment with the exact energy to tell or show you something that changes the course. Sometimes it's someone you meet by accident, in a casual conversation, in a waiting room, at a meeting you almost didn't attend, in an unexpected place, and they tell you exactly that, which your mind didn't know how to formulate, but your soul was asking for desperately. There's no logical explanation, there are no precedents, but there's something that clicks, as if that person had been sent just so you hear that phrase, that story, that idea that unlocks something you'd been looking for a long time without knowing it. Other times that encounter doesn't happen in person. It happens in a video you see by accident, in an interview that appears without you looking for it, in a phrase written by someone you don't know. And yet, what you read or hear arrives with such clear force that you can't ignore it. It wasn't information, it was direction. It wasn't coincidence, it was a personalized message that the universe put in front of you because you were already ready to understand it. This synchronicity is recognized by immediate resonance. It's that moment when you feel that person is speaking to you, even though they don't know you, that this encounter isn't new but remembered, that this phrase isn't external but internal, as if you had already known it, but had needed someone to say it to activate it. And the most powerful thing about this type of synchronicity is that it's not always about someone who stays in your life. Many times that person appears, says what they have to say, fulfills their function, and continues on their way. They didn't come to stay, they came to ignite. They came to awaken something in you that could only be activated through their presence, their story, or their energy. And when that ignites, you're no longer the same. That's why it's so important that when you feel that immediate connection, that sudden clarity, that inexplicable emotion in front of someone, you don't dismiss it as coincidence. Ask yourself, what part of me just awakened with this encounter? What new direction is this person pointing me to with their message, with their example, or with their story? Because many times it's not just what they tell you, it's what they awaken without saying it. Here's a practice that can help you recognize this synchronicity with more consciousness. Think about the last 3 people who have impacted your way of thinking or feeling. They can be real people, public figures, authors, even strangers. Write down what they told you or what they transmitted that moved something in you. Then observe what they have in common, what part of your process they helped you clarify or confirm. Because those encounters aren't casual, they're lighthouses. And the fact that they appeared just when you needed them wasn't luck, it was synchronicity. In the next chapter, we're going to see one of the most challenging synchronicities, the one that arrives disguised as chaos. We'll talk about the perfect crisis, that moment when everything seems to fall apart just when you thought you were moving forward, and how to learn to read that crisis as an opportunity to jump to the next level, not from control, but from a deeper understanding of what you're really releasing. Chapter 5. Synchronicity of the perfect crisis. There are moments when everything seems to move forward well. You feel focused, you're making decisions, it seems like everything starts to fall into place. And just then, something breaks. A project gets stuck without explanation, a relationship cools, money stops, motivation disappears, and you feel like everything you had achieved goes backward all at once. That's the 5th synchronicity, and although it doesn't seem like it, it's one of the most important. The perfect crisis. It's not just any crisis, it's the one that appears just when you were going up in your life, when you were finally daring to move forward, when you were touching a new internal frequency. And then something falls, gets disordered, gets stuck, and you think you failed, that you went backward, that you did something wrong. But if you look at it with more depth, that crisis didn't arrive to stop you. It arrived to reveal what still wasn't solid, what had to crumble so you wouldn't build your next stage on a weak foundation. It's like when an old house starts to creak just when you decide to expand it. It's not that the decision was incorrect, it's that when you move the structure, the cracks that were already there also move and come to the surface to be corrected, healed, strengthened. The same happens to you when you decide to expand. Your old fears, beliefs, habits, or relationships that no longer fit start to misalign, not because something is wrong, but because something inside you is asking to level up, and for that the old has to fall. A clear example. You decide to start something new. At first you feel inspired, with ideas, motivated. But shortly after you get blocked, doubt invades you. You don't know if it's useful, if it will work, if you did it right, and everything that before seemed clear becomes fog. That's a perfect crisis, not to make you go backward, but to force you to review from where you're doing this. Are you doing it from fear of failure or from confidence in your path? Are you doing it to please or to expand? And that internal review makes you stronger, more aligned, more real. Or imagine you start healing your relationship with money. You begin applying new practices, you change your habits, and suddenly an unexpected expense appears, and income falls. It seems like a mockery. But it's not. It's a silent test that asks, are you going to maintain your new energy even though the external result falls apart for a moment? If you hold yourself, if you don't return to old patterns of fear or desperation, that crisis becomes the anteroom of a new level. Because the magical mind understands something the logical mind doesn't want to accept. Just before a true expansion, everything that doesn't fit tends to crumble, not as punishment, but as cleaning, not as error, but as preparation. And if you learn to recognize that crisis as part of the process, you stop stopping every time something breaks, and you start looking at what's being built behind that rupture. Here's a powerful practice to activate this awareness. Think of a recent crisis you lived, it can be big or small, and write what part of your life was affected. Then ask yourself, what old version of me was holding that? What part of me felt comfortable there, even though it no longer did me good? And lastly, what new strength did that situation that seemed like just a problem force me to develop? By doing this, you transform the crisis into a teacher. And when you do that, you never return to the same internal place. In the next chapter, we're going to explore a completely different synchronicity, one that doesn't come with noise or with chaos, but with a deep calm that arrives without apparent reason, a certainty without logic, a feeling that everything is fine, even though you don't understand it. We'll talk about inexplicable peace and how that feeling can be one of the clearest signs that your soul already took control, even though your mind still doesn't know it. Chapter 6. Synchronicity of inexplicable peace. There are signs that make noise, that arrive with movement, with crisis, with people. But there are others that slip in silently, without drama, without notice, and without apparent logic. They arrive like a whisper, like a background sensation that can't be explained with words, and yet it changes everything. That's the sixth synchronicity, inexplicable peace. You recognize it because it appears when everything around you seems disordered, when the mind should be screaming, but it's not, when there are no guarantees, but you feel everything is going to be fine. Not because you can see it, but because you can feel it. It's a tranquility that doesn't come from the result, it comes from within. And when it appears, it's because something deeper already settled. Even though you still don't understand it, it's like being in the middle of a storm and noticing that inside there's no fear, there's certainty. As if a part of you already crossed the bridge, even though the body is still on the other side. It's a peace that doesn't depend on what's happening. It's an internal confirmation that doesn't need external proof. And that's why it's one of the most powerful signs you can experience. Imagine this, you're about to make an important decision. Your mind has 1,000 doubts. The people around you have opinions. Some tell you it's crazy, others that it's a risk. But there's something in you that feels light, calm, as if you knew that's the right thing, even though you can't explain it. That's inexplicable peace. It's not emotion, it's not enthusiasm, it's calm. And that calm comes from the soul, because the soul doesn't shout, the soul whispers. And when you listen to it, everything settles on another plane, another very common scene. You're going through a difficult moment. Perhaps you're without work, in the middle of a breakup, with economic uncertainty. And yet, there's a part of you that didn't break. On the contrary, it strengthened. As if something inside you knew that this void is temporary, that this pause isn't an ending, but a transition. And although you can't prove it, you know it. And that's enough. The important thing here is to learn to differentiate between true calm and emotional disconnection, because it's not about ignoring reality or acting like nothing is happening. It's about recognizing that when you feel peace without apparent reason, it's because your energy already took a leap and the body is still catching up to that change. That's why, when that sensation arrives, don't doubt it. Don't question it. Don't look for reasons to ruin it. Because many people, when they feel that calm, get scared. They think they're being naive or that they're trusting too much, and they try to return to worry as if it were the only safe place. But the magical mind doesn't do that. The magical mind recognizes peace as a sign and leans on it. It follows it, honors it. Here's a simple but powerful practice. When you feel that strange calm, instead of turning it off or looking for logic, stop, take a deep breath, and write it down. Write what you feel without explaining it. Just describe the sensation, where you feel it in your body, what thoughts accompany that state, and keep that writing. Because later, when what you don't understand today reveals itself, you'll return to that moment and say, "It all started there. That peace was telling me." In the following chapter, we're going to talk about the last synchronicity, one that arrives in a subtle, silent way, but so clear that it leaves no room for doubt. We'll talk about the silent confirmation, an intimate response that no one else notices, but you know it was for you. A song, a word, a look, something as small as it is exact that confirms you're on the right path, even though no one else sees it. Chapter 7. Synchronicity of the silent confirmation. There are answers that don't need noise. They don't arrive with fireworks. They don't come in a loud voice or with evidence others can see. But they're so exact, so intimate, that when you feel them, you know. You can't explain it. You can't convince anyone else it was real, but it was. That's the seventh synchronicity, the silent confirmation. It happens in an instant. You hear a song just after having launched an internal question. You see an exact word written on a wall just after making a difficult decision. Someone calls you just when you were thinking about that person. Or you look at the clock and it shows a number that has become a personal symbol for you. And you don't know why, but you know it was a message for you. Only for you. It has no logic, but it has weight. It has no form, but it makes sense. And that's why this type of synchronicity is one of the deepest. Because it doesn't seek to convince, it seeks to remember. It doesn't come to explain anything to you. It comes to confirm what you already knew inside, what your consciousness was beginning to accept, but your mind still doubted. And upon receiving that subtle sign, you feel something aligns. This isn't superstition. It's not simplified magic. It's sensitivity. It's the capacity to listen with the finest senses, to read your own life as if it were a movie made for you, where every scene has intention, where every symbol has a code, where every answer is calibrated for your current level of consciousness. And when you refine that capacity, you start noting these messages more often, not because they multiply, but because you're finally in tune with them. An example, someone is deciding to leave a job that no longer represents them. They doubt, feel fear, don't know if it's the right thing. They go out for a walk with the question still in their chest, and when crossing a corner, they see a sign that says, "The new begins when you release the old." It seems like something common, but it's not. Not for that person. Because in that exact moment, that phrase was an answer, a silent but definitive confirmation. Another case, someone has been working on a project in solitude for weeks, feeling that perhaps it doesn't make sense, that perhaps they're inventing everything. And in the middle of that state, they receive a message from someone who says, "Thank you for what you do. You don't know how much it helped me. It wasn't planned, it wasn't provoked, but it arrived at the right moment." And that phrase was enough to remember why they started, why they should continue, and that they're not alone. These confirmations don't need witnesses, because they're not for showing, they're for holding. They're like tiny lighthouses that turn on just when you're about to lose your way. And if you honor them, if you write them down, if you thank them, That sensitivity sharpens and the dialogue with the universe becomes clearer, more constant, more intimate. Here's a powerful practice. In the coming days, write down any situation, phrase, number, image, or coincidence that makes you feel a personal connection. It doesn't matter if it seems small, don't analyze it, just write it down. And at the end of the week, read it all again and ask yourself, what theme repeats? What direction is life pointing me to? What part of me feels seen by these signs? Because many times, the greatest confirmation isn't that the external speaks to you, but that you're finally listening. You don't need to control everything, just learn to read better what's already in front of you. Because the universe doesn't speak to you with words, it speaks to you with movements, with encounters, with pauses, with signs that seem small, but that contain deep answers. And when you stop looking outside for what you can only activate from within, you begin to see that you were never alone, you were just distracted. These 7 synchronicities aren't promises of immediate success. They're not magic formulas. They're reminders, clues that appear when you're prepared, not when you decide, but when your consciousness takes the leap. Each synchronicity prepares you for something. One shows you what you need to release. Another points you to a pattern you must see. Another connects you with someone who activates a dormant part of you. And another confirms in silence that you're on the right path. The internal treasure isn't a beautiful metaphor. It's real. It's the part of you that already knows, that already intuits, that already recognizes the perfect moment, even though your mind still doubts. And every time a synchronicity appears, what's truly happening is that treasure starts to shine a little more, because it feels seen, because you're finally paying attention. Everything you learned here is summarized in a simple but powerful idea. Life always responded. It's just that now you know how to listen to it. Now you can identify when a repetition isn't coincidence, but a call. When a loss isn't punishment, but space. When an encounter isn't casual, but direction. When a crisis isn't failure, but transition. And when a peace without logic or a silent sign are the confirmation that your soul is already walking ahead of your mind. So don't turn off this consciousness when the audio ends. On the contrary, refine it, observe yourself, write, converse with your life. Because now you know that each synchronicity is a key, and together they open the complete map. Not one that takes you to an external goal, but one that reconnects you with what was always waiting inside you. The true power isn't in forcing, it's in recognizing, in trusting, and in responding from a higher place than fear or control. Your task isn't to make the signs appear. It's to become someone who no longer needs to ignore them. Because whoever knows how to read the language of life doesn't depend on luck. They create destiny. And if this book reached you, it's because you're already ready for that. If you felt this audiobook activated something in you, don't let it go. Here in the collection of the chosen ones, there are other guides that can accompany you deeper. Listen to the abundant switch if you want to understand how gratitude changes your frequency and your reality. Listen to when nothing else works, if you need tools to move forward when everything seems to be against you. And listen to Magical Mind, Full Pocket if you're ready to create wealth from your internal energy. Each of those books was written to appear at the right moment, and if you're reading this, that moment might be now. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can continue receiving more content that will help you unlock your true potential. Hit that subscribe button and activate notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Your transformation continues here, and I want to accompany you on this journey. Subscribe now, and let's keep growing together.